Okay, so Brian Johnson in Project Blueprint. This guy claims he's reversed his biological age to 18.
18.
18 through this crazy regime, vegan diet, intense workouts, tons of supplements, even blood plasma exchanges. Yeah,
Wow.
millions of dollars a year. Is this for real or is this just some high-tech vanity project?
Well, what's interesting is the claim that he's not just living longer, he's reversing aging.
Right, and he's got these biomarkers, right, like proof. Heart rate variability,
Mhm.
blood sugar, organ function, supposedly amazing results.
Right, but how do you even measure biological age in the first place?
Yeah, good point.
Well, it's all about these biomarkers, like internal snapshots of your health.
Uh-huh.
One example is telomere length. Telomeres are these protective caps on your chromosomes.
Okay,
And as we age, they get shorter.
interesting.
So by measuring their length, scientists can kind of estimate biological age.
Which could be different from your actual age.
Exactly. So Johnson's saying his telomeres and other biomarkers are acting like those of an 18-year-old.
So there are actual measurements involved. It's not just how he feels.
Yeah.
But could there be something to his method?
Potentially. I mean, there is some actual science backing up some of what he's doing.
Like what?
Well, take calorie restriction. Studies have shown that if you reduce calorie intake, but, without malnutrition, it can actually extend lifespan in animals.
Huh.
There's even some evidence that it might work in humans, too.
So you're saying Johnson's extreme diet could be tapping into this?
It's possible. Like, what if he's just on a much more intense level?
Okay, so there's a basis in real science for at least some of what he's doing, but not everyone's buying it, right?
Of course not. There are plenty of skeptics.
What are they saying?
They're basically saying, look, isn't this just a supercharged version of what we already know? Like, eat right, exercise, get enough sleep.
Right.
They're saying he's taking that and cranking it up to 11.
Yeah.
But with a massive price tag.
And most people can't afford blood plasma exchanges.
Exactly. So is this really scientific progress? Or is it a wealthy guy pushing the limits of what's possible, but only for the wealthy?
Right, right. Even if there is something to it, are there long-term consequences we don't know about?
That's the thing. We're in uncharted territory.
Yeah.
Just because we can manipulate the aging process doesn't mean we should. What if things backfire down the road?
True. So lots of unanswered questions and a price tag most of us couldn't dream of. But is there anything we can learn from this, even if we're not signing up for blood plasma swaps?
Oh, absolutely. One big takeaway is consistency. Johnson's regime is over the top, but it highlights how important it is to stick with healthy habits over time, even if they're on a much smaller scale.
Okay, so even small efforts can make a difference.
Yeah, think of it like compound interest, but for your health.
That makes sense. Small changes over time can have a big impact. But how do we know which changes to make? Johnson's doing a million things, most of which aren't feasible for us regular folks. So where do we even begin?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Separating the hype from the science, finding what works for you. To help us with that, we reached out to some experts.
Okay.
Dr. Elaine Carter, a top gerontologist, had some really interesting observations about Johnson's results.
Oh, cool. And what about the ethical considerations?
Yeah, Dr. James Patel, a bioethics expert, brought up some really important points about the potential societal impact of all this.
Let's hear what they had to say.
Well, Dr. Carter was actually impressed by Johnson's biomarkers.
Really?
Yeah, she said they definitely remarkable, but she also said impressive biomarkers don't automatically equal a longer life or immunity from age-related diseases.
Oh, so even if your insides look young, doesn't mean you're guaranteed a long and healthy life.
Exactly. Aging is incredibly complex. We're just scratching the surface of understanding it.
And what about Dr. Patel?
Well, he brought up a point we've touched on, the potential for widening the gap between the haves and have-nots.
Right. If this stuff becomes more common but stays expensive, what does that mean for society?
Yeah. Could we end up with a world where only the wealthy can afford to significantly extend their lives?
That's pretty unsettling.
It definitely raises some ethical red flags, because if we're talking about potentially extending human lifespan, it needs to be available to everyone.
I completely agree. But couldn't this be like other groundbreaking technologies? Think about smartphones or gene editing.
Oh, so.
They started out expensive and exclusive, but eventually became more accessible as technology improved and costs came down.
That's a possibility. It gives us some hope that these life-extending interventions could become more affordable, available to more people.
Okay.
But that's a big if. We need to be very careful about how this technology develops and who has access to it.
So,
Yeah.
lots to think about. It seems like Johnson's experiment, while extreme and maybe out of reach for most of us, is making us confront some big questions about the future of aging, healthcare, even society itself.
Absolutely. And while Johnson might be grabbing headlines with his over-the-top approach, there's a lot we can all do right now to improve our health and well-being.
Without breaking the bank.
Exactly. Without resorting to those extreme measures.
You're talking about those longevity basics, right?
Right.
Diet, exercise, sleep, managing stress.
Exactly. Those everyday choices can have a huge impact on our health, now and in the future. And they're accessible to everyone.
Okay. So it seems like there's a lot more to unpack here. Johnson's case is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
We need to dig deeper into the science, the ethics, the potential implications of all this.
Definitely.
And we'll do just that in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned. This conversation is just getting started. So we've talked about the science behind some of what Johnson's doing. We've heard from experts, some who support it, some who question it.
Right. And the ethical questions about extending lifespan, especially when it's so expensive.
Yeah. It's not just about if we can slow down or reverse aging. It's about who gets to benefit.
Exactly. But is Johnson really the first person to try this? Haven't people been searching for the fountain of youth forever?
Oh, totally. The desire to extend life and youth is ancient. Myths, legends, alchemists, they've all been obsessed with it.
So what makes Johnson different? Is it just that he's rich? Or is there more to it?
I think it's both. His wealth gives him access to these cutting-edge treatments, stuff most people can't even imagine.
Like the blood plasma.
Right. But also, his approach is really data-driven.
How so?
He's constantly monitoring his biomarkers, tracking everything, adjusting as he goes.
So he's treating his body like a science experiment.
Kind of, yeah. And that's what makes it so fascinating and so controversial. He's pushing boundaries, but it raises questions about the ethics of it all.
Like he's a walking, talking test case for the future of aging.
Exactly. Whether he succeeds or not, he's making us think about what it means to age, what it means to be healthy, how far we're willing to go.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to our own anxieties about getting older.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why this is such an important conversation. It's not just about him, it's about all of us. How we view aging, health, our own mortality.
Okay, so Johnson's unique, but let's get back to the science. We talked about calorie restriction. You said there's evidence it could work.
Right. And this is where it gets interesting. More and more research is suggesting that calorie restriction, done safely with a doctor's guidance, might actually trigger pathways that promote longevity.
So it's not just about eating less. It's about flipping switches in our cells.
That's the theory. And it's not just calorie restriction. Researchers are looking at nutrients, supplements.
Like those 100-plus supplements Johnson takes?
Maybe some of them. There's resveratrol, found in red wine. It's showing promising results in animals.
So a glass of red wine a day could actually be good for you.
It's possible, but we need more research. The point is, there's a lot of exploration happening in this field. We're just starting to figure out how aging works at the cellular level.
Sounds like potential, but also a lot we don't know. And even if these things work, there's still the issue of access and cost.
Absolutely. That's why it's important to focus on what we can control now.
The basics, right? Diet, exercise, sleep, stress.
Exactly. They might not be as exciting as blood plasma exchanges or gene therapies, but they're the foundation.
And we can all do those things.
And they don't just add years to your life, they add life to your years. It's about having the energy and vitality to enjoy your life, however long it is.
So maybe we should be focusing on extending health span, not just lifespan.
I love that. It's not just about living longer. It's about living better. And we can all do that.
Okay, so we've talked science, ethics, even a bit of history.
We've looked at the extremes and the basics.
But what does all this mean for us, regular people trying to make sense of it all?
That's the big question, and it's one we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay with us as we continue this exploration. Bryan Johnson, Project Blueprint, and the search for a longer, healthier life. Okay, so much to think about. The science, the skepticism, the ethics. We've even touched on a little bit of history.
Yeah, and we've seen both sides of the coin. The hardcore biohacking like Bryan Johnson, but also those simple lifestyle choices we can all make.
Right. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep wondering, what does it all mean for us? You know, just regular people trying to figure this all out.
That's the question, isn't it? We all have to answer it for ourselves.
Yeah, it's like we have all these amazing possibilities maybe to live longer and healthier than ever before, but it's also a bit overwhelming.
I agree. It's a lot to take in. And it makes you think about some pretty big questions. Like, what would we even do with all that extra time? What really matters? What do we want to leave behind?
It really makes you think it's not just about adding years, it's about adding life to those years.
Exactly. That's where health span comes in. It's not just about living longer, it's about living well. Having the energy, the vitality to do what we love, to connect with people, to make a difference.
And that's something we can all work towards, whether or not we have access to expensive treatments.
Absolutely. There's so much we can do. Eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep, managing stress, having good relationships.
It's like we have this power to shape our own longevity.
It's empowering, isn't it? We're not just stuck with aging. We can actively take care of ourselves.
So thinking about Bryan Johnson and this quest for eternal youth, what are some things our listeners can take away from all of this?
Well, I think a big one is that longevity is a journey, not a destination. It's not about hitting some magic age or becoming perfectly healthy. It's about the choices we make every single day.
And those choices don't have to be drastic or cost a fortune.
Right. Even small changes, if you stick with them, can make a huge difference.
Another thing that struck me is that we're all in this together. The choices we make affect not just us, but everyone around us, even the future of society.
It's true. It's about taking responsibility for ourselves, but also working together to create a world where everyone can live long, healthy lives.
And maybe the most important takeaway, what do you think?
This whole quest for longevity, it's really a quest for meaning, figuring out what matters most to us and making the most of our time.
Because ultimately, it's not just about living longer, it's about living a life that's full and meaningful.
Exactly. And that's something we all can do, starting right now.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of longevity. We hope you've learned something and maybe even feel inspired to take charge of your own health and well-being.
It's been a pleasure. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep striving for a life that's full of energy, purpose, and joy.